My name is Angus Henderson, and today, November 16th, we put the wrong date on those. It's fine. I'm talking to Dr. Kathleen Kennedy. Kat. This interview is part of the OSU Diverse Sexuality and Gender Oral History Project, specifically focused on the history of the campus drag show, Dragonfly. So, when we last spoke, you told me you were a triple OSU alum. You grew up here in Oklahoma, didn't you?
Yes, I grew up in Oklahoma City, and actually my intentions when I graduated from high school was to go to OU. I went on a campus tour there, and they were so not friendly to me, I decided to come to OSU. So through a weird fluke, I ended up coming here, falling in love with the place, and staying for a long period of time.
I think we're nicer too.
I agree.
But what year was that, if you don't mind?
I graduated from high school in 1993.
Okay.
I was born in 1974.
So you remember the AIDS crisis?
I do, very clearly. The scare surrounding it, people not understanding how it was transmitted at first, and seeing it, my parents always watched the news every night. Seeing it just portrayed on the news and seeing how horrible it was. And, of course my mom was terrified. But at first people didn't understand. And then once people really did understand, it was almost too late for, unfortunately, the LGBT community in some populations.
Yeah. You told me you had gay neighbors.
I did growing up.
Yeah?
And, I didn't really even understand conceptually until I was probably in junior high or high school. They were always just my neighbors. And, my parents would have dinner with them. They were always extremely friendly to my family. I remember hanging out in their bedroom watching TV at some points. And they were very dedicated to each other. And one of them had been married before and had children from, previous marriage. And I always felt extremely comfortable. And I think because I knew them from a very personal standpoint, I think it changed my perspective of probably the LGBT community, and gave, I think for a lot of people, and this sound really nerdy when I say this, William Sumner talked about in-group, out-group in sociology, and people who are like themselves oftentimes think, you're in our group, you're like us. I think it's very easy when you have people that are different from you to be seen as out, or, they're not part of our group. We don't understand them. And you have to understand, you have to have that interaction. You have to see that everyone's human, everybody loves, and that everybody has the same similar struggles, that essentially your sexuality is just a very small piece of the pie.
Yeah. That wasn't nerdy. And don't worry about being nerdy. This is an oral history podcast. We're all nerds here. But what was it like when you came to OSU? You were talking actually out in the lobby with Sarah about your experiences on campus with...
It was really strange to me because I grew up in Oklahoma City, which is a pretty urban, it's not New York City, it's not Dallas, but it's pretty urban, it's pretty metropolitan. In high school, it was, again, clearly probably pretty nerdy, but I hung out with some of the artsy-fartsy kids, and we'd like to do weird artsy-fartsy things. And, nothing too crazy adventurous. None of us were really drinkers, but we would, drive around Oklahoma City at night and try to, stumble in coffee houses and, let's go to the cemetery and take pictures, at dark. And, because we were all into photography at the time, and it was what we did to entertain ourselves. And we went to the Habana Cabana one weekend, and that was where I had my first exposure to drag. And I was like I'm a little person now, but back then I was less than 100-pound little girl. I had my since it was back in the 90s, I had my friends who were more goth with me, and we got in and we got to see the show, and it was amazing, and it was such a positive, happy, uplifting experience, and everybody laughed at each other, and you walk out feeling much better than when you go in, because it lifts your soul. It's just the joy of life.
That's wonderful. Not to jump ahead, but then you came to OSU, and there wasn't. Was there like a gay presence on campus?
SOTA was the organization, I believe, at the time when I was a college student, and when I lived in the residence halls for the majority of the time while I was here. I did go through sorority recruitment. I was Greek as well, and even now, a lot of sorority and fraternity members are very homogeneous, very much like each other typically, at least socioeconomically and racial backgrounds. That's changing a bit. Typically more conservative in their belief system, and I would argue even on campus, we recruit a lot of students that come from rural America who haven't had the interaction with different types of people that probably I had when I was growing up, and not just with sexual orientation or even gender. I'm talking, even with race sometimes. And so I was surprised at the reactions of some other people, because I think I always took my life experiences for granted and assumed that was the norm, and it was not. And I remember they would always have, hey, support, LGBT students. It was Wear Denim Day, and they would chalk the sidewalks. And I remember people dumping soda. I remember seeing someone dump soda on the chalking. I remember they'll call it, I think, Covered It, where they talked about, again, people writing nasty things on top of the chalking. It wasn't the environment we think of today, but you have to think of where we've come from in society, because, it was really, yes, you had the Stonewall movement, and you had the AIDS crisis, but it was really before we began to see people of different sexual orientations, on TV talking to us, portrayed in the media in a positive light. Before, even Defense of Marriage Acts, and before also marriage equality now. We've went through all of those steps as a society, and this is way before that.
Yeah. You mentioned Ellen when we talked the first time. She was what, 1994 when she came out on TV?
I think so. It was during my college experience, and it was such a big scandal. It was everywhere. You would, in all the news magazines, and this is before everybody was on the internet, but you could find information about on the internet, and how she was extremely well liked by most Americans before that. But then it seemed like once she did come out, there was a certain group within the population that shut down to liking her just because of her sexual orientation. And I'm not wired that way. To me, I just never really have been. And so it's hard for me to understand.
Well, I imagine so. You've grown up with gay people just as your neighbors.
Yeah.
As people that you know. It's tough to be mean to people when you know and love them already.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess some people do it. But anyway, you made a friend called Mike Millard.
Mm-hmm. We actually ran against each other for a position within the Residence Halls Association. And that's how we met each other. I believe we both lost the election. But it was great. I think you should lose at least one election within your lifetime, and I've had that experience. And we continued to work together, and we were extremely close when we were in college together. I feel bad because as life has progressed us, we have the occasional conversation with each other. And again, I'm not on Facebook. My husband is. He keeps track of all my friends for me. But I remember going places with him and people giving him the look, because Mikey was out. And he was proud about who he was. He would wear, jewelry that would indicate that he was out, because it was, had rainbows on it. He would talk about, with people he was close to, his experiences losing his boyfriend before he came back to OSU. And until you're around someone and you see the looks and you see, the subtle things that we don't obviously notice all of the time, it really began to hit home.
Yeah. How did he lose his boyfriend?
I believe he had AIDS, but I could be, again, I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
Yeah. It sounds like campus was not very friendly even during the crisis.
No.
Oh, man.
No. The soda organization, I believe they probably, when it came to like the regular meetings, he would often tell me, because Mike was part of soda, that, oh, well, we only have about 10 to 15 really active members.
I think at that time too, they like wouldn't advertise where the meeting was going to be.
And I don't know that part of it.
That's just what I've heard, that you had to know somebody who knew where the meeting was going to happen, and then they would lock the door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even for Dragonfly, when we had our first show, we were always very cognizant about having OSU police officers around, not because we were concerned about the people that were coming for the drag show. We were just concerned about people protesting, people acting fools. We just didn't know what would happen, and we wanted to be able to protect all the students that were there. And it's bad that you have to think like that, but you have to think like that nowadays, especially if you're working for the university. You have to think in a risk management mode of what are we going to do if something does occur that is not good.
Yeah. Plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Right. And we never had issues. Never.
Good.
Yeah.
How did you end up hosting a drag show on campus? I feel like we made a jump there.
I hope that was okay.
That was good, but I also want to know more.
I believe it was either Chris Hill or Dennis Rudisil, and they had been working with Soda, and I don't remember if Soda was still Soda at that time because they've had a couple different names changes since then. And they said, oh, well, we're getting ready for Pride Week. We wanted to see if we could have, a drag show. I'm like, okay, let's figure out how to do this. And I mean, the students within SUAB were always amazing in the fact that they were when they got an idea, they were always so extremely excited about it and self-motivated. It was more like, what do we have to do to work through logistics to make it happen?
Yeah.
And, I had been to drag shows, but clearly I did not consider myself a drag expert, especially when discussing making physical changes to yourself to try to make yourself appear more one way or the other, whether you're a king or a queen, costuming issues, lots of costuming issues, which I never realized was going to take so much time. The other thing was teaching, some of the students were involved that were part of student organizations that had opted to be part of this. Some of them were more skilled in the dancing aspect and entertainment aspect than others. And we would always have an opening number. And I remember sitting there in one of the earlier shows thinking, it's going to be a miracle if all these folks are going to get this opening number. And because I also advised Freshman Follies. And so, at least with Freshman Follies, usually each of the Greek chapters typically auditions people. With Dragonfly, our auditions were mainly to make sure they were competent enough to be able to, do basic participation, and then we would get them where they needed to go when it came to, their performance and be able to physically adapt their body and getting their outfits to fit correctly and making sure we didn't have any blunders where the outfit blew apart on stage, because that is always a risk as well. So
you weren't still a student at this point, were you?
No. I was not still a student. I was a full-time staff member.
Oh, you were the what?
SUAB advisor. Yeah. It's probably one of the best job I've ever had in my life. It was a lot of fun.
That sounds fun.
It was fun. And I learned, again, depending on what students' interests are, you learn about it along the way. And so we had a dog show once, and, I don't even own a dog. Well, I do now, but I didn't at the time. and just you learn the bits and pieces about our students' lives, and as their interests change, you learn about their changing interest, and it was constant adaptation.
That sounds amazing. So, when did you become advisor?
I think I started at OSU around 2005, in the fall of 2005. I was here for 5 years.
Okay. Who was the soda advisor? Do you remember?
Oh.
Wasn't Cindy Washington, was it?
It may have been. It may have been at that time, because she was also an advisor. And, as generations have transitioned, there have been a couple. And, I remember talking to them, but I mean, our organizations were so closely together on that event, it wasn't even, there wasn't a lot of need to, I need to check in with you on what we're doing, because they were there, we were all working on it together. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
How did you kind of divide it up? It sounds like there wasn't much divide.
No. Not that I remember in my head. Dennis may have different viewpoints or remembrances of this, but no, I think it was all hands on deck, because basically everybody working together, trying to get this show on the road. And I mean, aside from making sure the students were taken care of and that they represented themselves in the best way possible, we had that educational piece with them, with the dress and the performance, and, understanding of what they needed to do when they were on stage. And we wanted to be able to do the absolute best they could, but we also had a lot of the behind the scenes stuff of the logistics of where we're going to set up the lights. Where do we need to mark off for students, so they don't cross this boundary? Is it going to be okay? Are we going to take, donations at the door? Are we, because I believe we raised money for the Tulsa Equality Center for the first few that we had, and made a pretty large donation at the end of the night with the money that we had raised, and which was amazing. And we also wanted to educate the students that were there at the show about the Tulsa Equality Center. So we always had to create a script, and we had to have something for our MC to read off, to talk about those issues and what the money was going to go towards and everything. And so, and we would have the script of the show. And so there were a lot of logistics involved with it.
Yeah.
For a 2-3 hour presentation.
How did you find the money for it?
For the drag show?
Yeah.
SUAB, the one good thing about, we were part of the student union, and the student union was always very supportive of, us be able to provide educational events and entertainment for the students on campus. And so it wasn't a struggle. The money was like the last of the real major concerns.
Wow.
Right. It was more us being able to pull it together than anything else. And, making sure that the people that we recruited were genuinely there for the right reasons, with a good heart, and that they were going to be able to pull it off at the end of the day.
Oh.
Yeah.
Were there any people with not good intentions?
No, but at first when we started, we weren't sure how it was going to go. And it was, and again, we never had issues, never. But I guess in the back of my mind, I always had those concerns.
Was there a show every year for all 5 years you were there?
I believe so, yes.
Wow.
Yeah. It was always one of our bigger, I would call it anchor programs.
And where did it happen?
Well, the first year we did it in Starlight Terrace, and it outgrew itself. And thankfully, I don't believe we broke fire code that year. Then we moved to the ballroom, and then broke fire code that year. So sorry, student union. We had lots of discussions about that, Dennis and I. He probably remembers me as the worst advisor in the world for having those discussions post-tense. But and then there's been times that it was in the theater, the student union theater. So it has moved and transitioned in different places, but it's clearly, it outgrew the Starlight Terrace.
I would imagine so. It sells out almost every year.
Yes, it does. It does. Again, I'm students standing there at the door clicking people in to make sure we weren't going to, have any safety issues.
That's smart. A few years after you left, I believe, it went to the West Watkins Center.
Yeah.
And I think it filled that up, too.
I believe it did as well.
Have you kind of kept in the loop as to what's happened with Dragonfly after you left?
Ironically, yes, just because I did come back. I had started my PhD before I left to go to a different institution, and I needed to complete my dissertation. So I came back and worked for Campus Life for a bit when they did not have an SUAB advisor for about 6 months. And it was during the spring season when they do Dragonfly. So I got to come back, and I wasn't there for the show because I had a professional presentation in Washington, D.C. at the time. But it makes me feel good that it has lasted. And honestly, I don't know. I mean, I know OU does not do a program like this through their activities board. I don't believe the University of Tulsa does this through their activities board. We may be one of the only universities, not the only, but one of the few universities in the United States that has done this for as long of a period of time as we have.
We are. At least from my research. There are a few, but they don't tend to be university condoned.
Oh, so they're done off campus or?
Yes. Or just in cities where there's an established drag scene. Whereas in Stillwater, that is the established drag scene.
Yeah.
There's no gay bar in this town.
No, unless something's changed since I left.
No, I mean, we all go to the Stonewall, but
yeah.
Mixed crowd. Did you ever go to the Stonewall with, say, Mike?
No. Well, I can't remember. I think it's possible that we did, but I mean, Stonewall was the bar of our choice, so I will definitely say that. Again, clearly, I'm a little bit nerdy. When we went out to hang out, have a discussion, and have a drink.
Mm-hmm. That's the way to do it, really.
We weren't there to hook up with random people and, go home at the end of the night with someone we didn't know. So.
Whoa. I don't believe you. So I have, a bad reproduction of the newspaper article from 2004. So the first little sentence there says, there will be a drag queen show.
Oh my gosh.
And then a comic in the spring semester. And that's from 2004. Do you remember this article at all?
No, I do not. But that doesn't mean anything. But I don't think it took a minute for it to take off. But I don't think people realized how big this was going to become. I had no clue. Like I said, I had no clue. We started in the Starlight Terrace. The student union built the runway for us. We had to put up partitions, and we separated a room in the back for people to change and get dressed and everything.
Oh.
So the first one was really pretty low scale.
It sounds like it. How? So you did it the first year, and it went really well.
Oh, yeah.
So the next year, was it all kind of the same people involved, or?
Some of the same people, and of course, SUAB always got new people in and out, SOTA always got new people out, and so it was just bringing in new people every year. I mean, part of the developmental idea of having organizations like this is that you are constantly helping students develop their leadership skills, and this is a great way to do it, to be part of something like this. And it builds their buy-in, and it helps with their self-confidence, and it helps them gain skills that they can use later down the road. And so it was, we had people that transitioned in and out from year to year. But then there were the people that were always the diehards that are like, oh, as long as I'm here on campus, I'm helping with Dragonfly.
Like Dennis?
Yeah.
Pardon me. Whoa. So, the first time we talked, you mentioned having shirts made for Dragonfly.
I couldn't find any shirts, and I thought we had. I pulled out my tub. Because what I've done is I've cut up all my SUAB t-shirts, and I was like, I'm going to t-shirt quilt them. Well, they're just living in the tub right now. I have not t-shirt quilted them. So I flipped through and couldn't find any. I have my shirt from a couple of years ago when I was back as SUAB advisor for a minute but I do not have. And I don't think at the beginning we made shirts because I didn't think thought it was that big of a program. Dennis may have had the shirts, but
he said he would dig, but
same
he's
thing
probably
I did.
got a tub too.
Well, I mean, I remember I sat down one day and I said, oh my gosh, I'm not using any of these anymore, but I'm going to cut them up and keep them all. And so everything SUAB related, I cut up, I saved the big component of it and threw it into a tub. And so my tub's about, and I went through it last night, could not find it.
Isn't that how it goes?
And I'm not sure we made t-shirts that early on because, again, we always had an SUAB shirt that members were supposed to wear to events, and I almost think that's what ended up happening.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I want a Dragonfly shirt. I do. That would be so cool. I don't think we've done it the last few years, but it would be great.
Oh no, I don't know if they have or not, but I can tell you who to contact for one.
You'll have to get me after this interview for sure. So, I almost forgot what I was going to say. When you came back for that about 6 months, was that you thinking about 2014?
I graduated in 2017, so it was actually in spring of 2016.
Oh, okay.
They were looking for a brand new advisor, and then they ended up hiring Kayla Loper for that position.
Okay. So you had it just a little bit before Kayla Loper, huh?
Yes.
Well, like sort of. Were you
sort of
on the?
I came back as a grad assistant, so I could get half tuition, and basically just kind of, again, their advisor left in December, and by the time Kayla was able to come on, it was probably August, like July, I think, and so I hung on with them until she started.
That's nice. What did you get to help with Dragonfly that time?
Yeah, I did. Like I said, I wasn't physically there. I had been working on I was part of a research grant with the Cherokee Nation and Emory University, and we were going to DC to present. And I had been working on that for multiple years. And so I actually left on a plane a couple days beforehand, and I flew in to Tulsa, and I could have barely caught the last 20 or 30 minutes of the show if I had driven in at that point, and I decided I wasn't going to push myself to do it, but it went off, and it was great, and the students had a great time, and it was positive energy amongst all. So
good.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm rehashing the question, but I want to know like how exactly you help students get Dragonfly off the ground, because I know they don't know what they're doing when they come in.
Well, part of it is pure knowledge of event production. Clearly, I was never a drag queen, or I was never a drag king. I'd never done that myself. But there were people that knew what they were doing in that regard, so I was probably not the most helpful. But, I've done event production. I know how to sew. I, know what lighting looks like. I can write a script, so from the pure event management standpoint, I felt like I was very helpful. There were people that had to be behind the scenes to help with the other physical alteration aspect of it. And so I've learned more than probably most about that, just from sheer exposure, because as much as you want to protect people's privacy, when you're doing quick, fast costume changes, oftentimes you need help wherever you can get that from. So.
That was a very modest way of putting it. I've heard stories of people just being butt naked backstage between sets, like, help me.
Yeah. And for students who were just, it was their first time, it was, how are we going to help them find these shoes? Okay, somebody go to Goodwill, look for shoes that will fit their feet into these shoes. And okay, how are we going to alter this dress, or how can we bring in something to get this to work? And, you have to be creative and think outside the box to get to a good finished product, because you want the student to look, especially the drag queens. Being a drag king is typically much, I don't know, easier, but as far as costuming goes, it's typically easier to do. Drag queens, their costumes are typically way more intensive and flashy. And with the size differential, oftentimes, and the structure between some women's bodies and men's bodies, it can be difficult to find things that will pull off and work.
How on earth did you find drag queen costumes in Stillwater, Oklahoma?
A lot of our students, again, would resort to going out and hitting the resale shops and, some of our young men who were queens, who were smaller, had a much easier time, obviously, because they could walk in and they could find an old prom dress and modify it, or, at least a skirt, and then, put some kind of top with it. But again, you have to start on that process a little bit ahead of time. You can't just throw it together the week of. That doesn't happen. That does not happen.
How far in advance did you start planning Dragonfly?
Oh, at least a month and a half, I believe.
Oh, was that just
at least for getting? I believe for the first. Well, I can't remember exactly for the first time, but I know that after we kind of figured out what was going on, because once we figured out who were going to be our drag kings and queens, it was let's sit down and talk about what it is you need to start looking for, and what you need to be able to do to prep. If you're going to get a wig, you need to figure out who you're going to get that from, what the wig's going to look like. And again, I was not that person that typically had those conversations, but I'm down for it. I'm supportive. So
who was?
I can't even remember. I believe it was someone from Soda.
Okay.
Yeah. Who'd had experience doing drag. And unfortunately for our drag kings, most of the people who were, in that role were drag queens. But again, drag kinging, less physical alteration.
Yeah. Just some duct tape.
And a lot of makeup.
Yeah.
A lot of makeup.
How did you source the performers?
Well, I want to say the first year we did it, I know the year that I think we did it in Starlight, we encouraged other student organizations to send a representative, and I think there was like a monetary reward for the organization for sending a representative. And so we got someone from, I believe, Off-Campus Student Association, and we got a couple of our fraternity or sororities to send people, and so it was a real mix of individuals. I mean, but we've never had major groups of people. I mean, we're not turning away hundreds of people to be participating in the show. Some years we were lucky to have 10 people, and other years it was like 15 or 16, which made for a really long show. But there was always typically the audition, because we, again, wanted to make sure that people knew their responsibility to be quality performers. And we also wanted to make sure, also that the performances were within, were not too risque. Because you can have those issues as well.
How did you decide what was going to be too risque? Well,
yeah.
Were you on the judges panel?
No, never on the judges panel. So I think it was more making sure there was like not costuming errors, because sometimes when people would try out and perform, you would see things you didn't need to see. If somebody's just sitting there dry humping something, that's not really performance. If it looks like it's a stripper, that's probably not a performance, or we don't only need certain aspects of that. I mean, you have sometimes had to work with people on their talent portion of it to kind of get it to be what we would consider a normal for a drag show. Especially if you have students that haven't really ever been to a drag show.
That makes sense.
I don't know why they would go down that road of thinking, oh, it's like a striptease. No, it's not.
Oh, well, I'm glad you had at least been to some drag shows so you knew what to look for.
And it wasn't just my voice. I promise you that there were groups of students, and sometimes you knew after people did their first original performance, you're like, wow, okay, we need to help them with this.
Oh. So there was a lot of student run.
Oh, it was supposed to be mainly student run. basically, as the advisor, I felt like my role was to advise. If they were like, oh, we don't know what we need to do with this, and be like, okay, well, here's your options. Let's try A, B, C, or D. And then also to make sure they abided by the policies and procedures of the university and didn't, violate any of those, and made sure that financially we had all our ducks in a row to be able to pay the winners and to contract with the drag queens when they came in. And, if we need to order anything for the set, we would order it and it would come in on time. If we've had any handouts, because we've, had people had the drag queens throw Mardi Gras beads, and we've given out glow lights, or the glow sticks. And, so it's been make sure campus police were involved. So, yes, it's supposed to be student-led.
How did you end up with professional drag queens? You hadn't mentioned them before.
I feel like that was Dennis. I feel like he was and I cannot I'm sorry, it has been a while for me. So if any of this is off, it's probably because I have fuzzy memory. But it was one of the students who decided that we needed to probably do that. And it worked extremely well because, they're used to being in shows, and they can oftentimes fill in time. Like if there is a wardrobe malfunction or somebody's having trouble behind the stage, they can fill the time in with entertainment and making jokes and, bringing up part of the audience on the stage and, having them do something funny or quirky. So it worked out for the best for us. And then we also had them come to campus either the day of or a couple days before, because we would have them walk around as, marketing, and people would want to, hey, look at, for some students, they were just stunned and shocked, and other students were like, what's going on? And they would come up and want to talk to them. And, it's, all you have to think about is the selfie generation today and how popular that would be to be like, hey, look at me. I'm in this awesome picture with this drag queen who looks fabulous.
Oh,
so
yeah. I know we've done that a few times, but I don't know that we've done it recently.
Really?
I'll have to talk to somebody.
Yeah, it was always really fun. And the awkward part about it was, I know at least for sure on one year, there was a very religious group on campus that was having an informational set of billboards about abortion, very pro-life, and we were out there supporting Dragonfly. So, and it just shows that the university is a marketplace of ideas, because you have two totally different ideologies within one small area.
My Lord. Was there ever any friction between, say, marketing for the drag show and the rest of really?
No. I think I was overly concerned about, and again, from the standpoint of me being the advisor and again, protecting the university and protecting the students that were going to be there for the show. Yes, we had, we always contacted campus police, but we never had a problem. And campus police were always there, but it was always great. It always went smoothly. For the people who came just because they'd never been to something like that, they'd either get really into it and stay the whole show, or some of them would come for the first half and then leave, once they'd figured out what was going on and, had that experience, and I guess they were done. So
there's something strange about these women.
Yeah, they look better than most normal women, so.
What do you think changed between the time you were a student and the time you were doing a drag show in
I think American society.
Wow.
Do you not think so?
No, I think you're right, but I want to hear your perspective because you were more of a grown-up than me at that point. I graduated high school in 2005, so that was when I started, I came to school here, and I saw one of the drag queens walking around, and I got very excited, and that was the first time I'd seen a drag queen in real life.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was there for a little bit of that, but it was not something I was very a part of.
It was definitely still not the norm. I don't think that in any context that you could say drag is the norm. It's a part of our culture, and I think that it's something you would see in every urban location and some smaller towns, but it's for most people, I would still say that their experiences in having gone to one, still probably are not the norm. But um, again, I think it is people, like any great movement. If a movement is successful, they get the dominant culture to understand and see them as, normal everyday human beings and can relate to them on a personal level. I think for a lot of Americans, when they watched the news and saw African Americans in the civil rights movement having hoses turned on them and dogs sicked on them, and they were peacefully protesting, I think for some people that was enough to change their minds about civil rights. Um, you know, yes, the Stonewall riots had occurred, but it kind of died out for, the movement kind of died out for a while. And then you saw this resurgence where you began to see more great gay pride parades. And then you had Ellen DeGeneres coming out. And then, you hear more and more people discussing, why this is important to our society, why this is important for all of us as human beings. And I think it's easier to lift up and move a cause when you can connect, individual freedom and equality. And so it was almost inevitable, I think, that we got to the point where we were at. It just took the stair steps of having people on TV that were identifiable, and in the media, and celebrities that would talk about it, and and then understandings and discussions within educational settings. Kinsey gets dinged a lot, but we understand now that more about human sexuality than we ever did from the 1950s, and that time period is over. I don't know if we can ever. I don't think we will ever go back to that. I would hope that we do not, but you never know. So, I think it was just the natural evolution.
Yeah, I guess you can't turn back the clock, huh?
I don't think so. Not here in the United States, at least. Hopefully.
There's hoping. How big of an impact do you think RuPaul's Drag Race, like this show?
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. Because it's accessible to everyone. Anyone who has cable has access and ability to see that. And if you're not completely enthralled and, fascinated by it, I can get over some of the drama sometimes, but I can tell you that I've watched it on many occasions. I'm not like a hardcore catch it every week, but there's not many. I don't really watch TV every single week. There's nothing regular I typically watch. So yeah, but yes, definitely.
I think a lot of people are drawn in by the basic drama aspects.
Oh,
since it came out at the same time as like Big Brother and all those
the
other
Kardashians and Real Housewives, and America loves a scandal.
That's true. And what do drag queens love? The same thing.
Yeah.
Man. So, just since about, I guess, 2004, 2005, when you were doing this, to today, how do you think it's changed in the popular culture for drag?
I think it's way more accepted. I would argue that, but just because you did say, look at RuPaul's Drag Race, and I think now a lot of people understand that you can choose to do drag. It can be like an amazing part of your life, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you are, homosexual. Homosexual. That you could still be heterosexual, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you consider yourself gender different, or that you would necessarily be, transgendered. You can still experience that and do it, and be part of it, and still, and not to choose to do it full time. But then also for a lot of students, it's the coming together and the realization of, it's safe for me to do in this setting. I'm going to try it. And maybe this is an aspect of my life that I want to continue on after this. Maybe this is my real personality coming out that I've never experienced. And then going on to, continue to do it in Oklahoma City or Tulsa on the weekends and be a part of the kind of competitive nature of it. So, you have both sides of the coin on that. But I think anything you can do in your life that gives you an experience, helps you learn more about yourself, why not do it? So
that's college, right?
That is college, and this is the safe place to have those experiences most of the time.
Absolutely. So that's kind of the big overall picture. What about you? How do you think being involved in Dragonfly and the gay community in general has impacted your life?
I think I'm much more sensitive about other people, and I mean, I'm an empathetic person to begin with, but uh, I think I care deeply, and I understand that what it's. I am not an other. I'm very blessed in the fact that I understand I'm part of the dominant culture. I'm white. I'm very heterosexual. I lead a very vanilla lifestyle, but I understand how painful it can be for students who are different, whether that is through their sexuality or their racial ethnic background, or whether, it's even just from, relating to social class or, individual differences in growing up. I mean, all of us have different experiences, and I think it's just made me more aware, of that, and supportive of people, and supportive of being like, hey, we don't all have to be like each other. I think that's hopefully where we're moving to as a culture, because it's a lot healthier. I think with social media nowadays, it's so easy for people to go to, oh, well, I'm not like them. Maybe I'm not successful. Maybe I'm not good enough. And we don't need to think like that as individuals. We don't need to think like that as a culture. And so I think it's made me a better, I'm currently right now teaching. I think it's made me a better instructor. I teach sociology, so clearly I talk about these issues in my classroom, and I can relate it to real life stories and talk about people I know and people and their experiences in my classroom, and relate it in a very heartfelt, loving, kind way, for them to humanize the experience. I may not always succeed. I may, ramble on like this, but I try. I try. I try to make those differences, and I always encourage. I think I have an open enough classroom that I have a lot of students that are, either LGBT, or racially or ethnically, minorities, and you can't talk about sociology without talking about those experiences. And sometimes I don't even have to tell my story. Thankfully, I have students in the classroom that can tell their own personal story and relate that. And for some of these students, it's the first time of having that interaction.
That's wonderful. I don't think we mentioned where you teach now. I mean, you don't have to, but you're still a professor here in Oklahoma, right?
I still teach here in Oklahoma, yes. I teach in a very teach at a regional institution in rural Oklahoma. So
there's no drag show there, is there?
No, there is not. But they do have certain events related to like Pride Week, but clearly not as developed as what you were going to see here at Oklahoma State.
How do you think Oklahoma State kind of rates so far as our now acceptance of this community among other, at least Oklahoma campuses?
I would say this is probably one of the safer campuses you can be on.
That's kind of my thought too. But
I could be wrong about that, but I mean, I would definitely say, it's a different place than it was when I started school here in 1993. If my son told me he was LGBT and said, hey, I'm thinking about going to Oklahoma State University, I would not worry about him coming here. I would know that he would have a community to be part of, and so that would make me feel good.
Good. Me too. I'm part of that community there. It's very nice. So, okay. I have kind of a basic last question, and that is, what do you think makes Dragonfly unique? What do you think makes it Dragonfly?
I think that you have a mix of students who decide they're going to try this and see what they think about it, and these are novices. And then they're able to work with people that are professionals, and they see, how, all of the things you have to do to go through to get to this point. So, I mean, not only are they, learning about the LGBT community, they're also learning about what it's like to put on a show, and what is entertainment like, and how can you entertain other people. And for a lot of them, it's like the first time they've ever had that spotlight on them, and they feel more comfortable being behind that mask of being in drag compared to their normal life where they're very introverted and quiet. And so that's always really fun to see people's true personalities kind of begin to come out. Wow, I can't even remember what the question was at this point.
No, you're good.
What makes it special?
Yeah.
I think it's the students. I think it's the fact this is a student-ran, student-led show, and that the students have embraced it for so long. And it's been a part of OSU culture for so long now.
It's becoming part of the institution.
I hope so. I mean, I'm happy that it is.
Me too. Is there anything you'd like to say to those 18, 19, 20-year-old gender and sexual minority students that are maybe watching this video now?
I would say that, I know that depending on where you're living, that life is oftentimes difficult for you, and you may not feel like you have the support that you need either from your family or from your friends, or that maybe you haven't even expressed that you are considering or might possibly, be interested in being transgendered or even homosexual, but that when you come to college, this is your opportunity to possibly try those things and those ideas on in a safe way, and that you have a community here willing to support you. And so endure now and come to Oklahoma State University.
Thank you so much. Do you have any last words? Or are you pretty much good there?
I'm good.
That was wonderful. Thank you.